Today, whether you work in New York or Tokyo, we are all part of a global community, and working with people from other countries is becoming increasingly familiar to us. Of course, language skills are necessary, but those alone aren't enough. For example, when it comes to working with people from the United States, having good English skills is certainly essential, but we also need to learn the cultural differences between Americans and Japanese. The culture in which we grow up has a profound impact on how we see the world. In any given culture, members are subconsciously conditioned from birth to understand the world in a particular way, to see certain communication patterns as effective or undesirable, and to consider certain ways of making decisions natural or strange. Of course, every individual is different, and we should not stereotype others based on where they come from. However, we should have humility to recognize the influence of cultural factors over our behaviors, as well as respect for individual differences. Both are important. What do you think makes a good communicator in business? Well, the definition varies significantly from culture to culture. In Anglo-Saxon cultures, including the United States, people are subconsciously trained to communicate as literally and explicitly as possible, while in many Asian cultures, they often believe good communication is implicit, subtle, and nuanced. These contrasting styles of communication are often referred to as low context and high context, respectively. Low context cultures like the US assume that there is very little shared knowledge, so messages have to be precise and clear in order to avoid misunderstandings. Conversely, communication in high context cultures like Japan is based on the assumption that they share a lot of common understanding and knowledge. Communication is often implicit to save time and maintain relationships. For example, a question like, "Can you complete this project by next week?" may bring ambiguous answers. "It will be very difficult, but I'll do my best. We'll think about it." Low context communicators may take them as yes, but they virtually mean no. Another cause of conflicts in international business is the difference in decision-making processes. For example, Americans usually prefer a top-down approach, in which generally the person in charge makes decisions quickly on behalf of the entire group. Rejecting the need for group agreement, the American boss says to the group, "This is what we are going to do," and most members of the team fall in line, regardless of their own opinions. By contrast, a majority of Japanese companies belong to consensus culture, where the decision-making takes quite a long time, since everyone is consulted. In typical Japanese companies, consensus building starts with informal, face-to-face discussions. This process of informally making a proposal and gaining support is called root binding, or in Japanese, nemawashi. With a longer consensus-based decision-making process, implementation is quicker since everyone is aware of the decision, most people agree with it, and the decision is fixed and inflexible. On the other hand, Americans often believe that a decision is just a temporary agreement to continue discussion, and it can always be changed to respond flexibly to variable situations. Japan and the United States ended up having different conceptions of what it means to be a good communicator in business. Such differences often come from the history of each country. Since Japan is an island society, in most of its history, it has been closed off from the rest of the world, and the population grew to be homogeneous. During its thousands of years of shared history, Japanese people have generated layers of shared context to become particularly skilled at picking up each other's messages in order to communicate smoothly, maintain relationships, and preserve harmony within the community. By contrast, the United States has been shaped by enormous inflows of immigrants from all over the world within the last 250 years, all with different histories, languages, and cultural backgrounds. Because they had very little shared context, Americans soon had to realize that they needed to make their messages as explicit and clear as possible, with little room for ambiguity and misunderstanding. The fact that the USA became one of the lowest context cultures in the world implies what we need in cross-cultural collaboration. Due to the increasing globalization, we have a growing opportunity to work with people with different backgrounds. We need to develop a skill to switch from high context to low context communication as necessary. Otherwise, the messages they receive might be different from the messages you meant. If you work with people from different cultural backgrounds, you will encounter significant differences in many aspects, such as what it means to be late, how they build trust, and the manner of providing feedback. We often make the mistake of assuming that all differences, conflicts, and misunderstandings are rooted in the individual's personality, when they are usually the product of cultural differences. For example, the Japanese consensual decision-making process is quite different from the American top-down approach. Yet, the way we are conditioned to make decisions in our own culture seems so obvious and natural that it is difficult to imagine that another culture might do it differently. Trapped in our own cultural bias, we often end up thinking that their way is wrong and inefficient. However, both consensual and top-down decision-making processes can be effective under specific conditions. Each country has developed the most suitable culture for its own environment. In order to collaborate effectively, we first need to be aware of how culture impacts us. Then, talk about the cultural differences that influence your style. We can avoid problems by explaining and understanding what seems natural and comfortable to each side. Working in a diverse community is challenging, but it is also a remarkable experience full of endless surprises and discoveries.